Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In a quiet suburb of Washington, D.C., the early morning light bathed the affluent homes in golden light. Clarissa Beaufort, Chief Judge of the State Court of Appeals, was preparing to leave her residence for a crucial court meeting. Her impeccable attire, leather bag, and confident gait reflected years of discipline and achievement. Her black SUV, a state-of-the-art model, was parked in front of her house. Keys in hand, she was about to get in when a shrill siren broke the neighborhood's calm. Officer Derek Collins, a young, arrogant-looking white police officer known for his racial prejudice, emerged from his patrol car. "Hello, madam, stop," he shouted authoritatively. Clarissa looked up in surprise. "Good morning, officer. May I ask why you are speaking to me like this?" she asked calmly. Collins pointed at the SUV. "This car is stolen. Get out immediately." Clarissa felt her blood run cold. "This car is in my name. I'm the owner." But Collins wasn't listening. He didn't see the judge, the authority, or the experience. He simply saw a black woman in front of him. Neighbors came out in shock, some taking out their phones to film the scene. Clarissa, despite the tension and humiliation, remained upright and composed, refusing to give in to panic or anger. Without explanation or evidence, Officer Collins ushered her into his patrol car. Passers-by murmured, some dared to protest, others stood frozen in shock at the blatant injustice. In that moment, Clarissa knew that today would be more than just a courtroom meeting. It would become a fight for dignity, justice, and truth, a fight that would implicate Attorney General Antoine Delacroix and expose the true face of systemic racism in the city. The patrol car moved slowly down the quiet street, its siren off but its lights flashing. Clarissa Beaufort, sitting in the back, remained calm. She watched the neighborhood pass by through the window, each house seeming to silently participate in her humiliation. "Officer Collins, I ask that you please check my papers and proof of ownership of this vehicle," she said in a firm but measured voice. Collins, tense, only responded with a sneer. "Ma'am, I don't need to see your papers to know you're a suspect." Clarissa frowned, a flicker of suppressed anger in her eyes. "You're threatening me for no reason, and you know that's illegal." Collins shrugged and turned his head toward the traffic. "I'm just doing my job. Get out now." Clarissa sighed inwardly. She knew this kind of situation, prejudice took over, even before the law. She took out her phone and tried to call her personal lawyer, but the line was busy. In the car, Collins turned to her, his face closed. "If you cooperate, this will be quick. If not." "Otherwise what?" Clarissa asked calmly. "You're treating me like a criminal when I'm a judge. You know perfectly well you can't do that." Collins looked away, uncomfortable with his composure. Outside, the neighbors were beginning to film. Murmurs could be heard, and a crowd was forming in front of the house. Curious children, shocked retirees, outraged passers-by, all watching this scene of discrimination live. Clarissa knew public opinion would be on her side, but she had to remain strategic. She took a deep breath and said calmly, "Every unjust act leaves a mark. You will be held accountable, officer." Collins, embarrassed but proud, started the car and continued toward the police station. Clarissa, despite her fear and anger, felt her determination growing. This arrest would not just be a personal affront, it was the beginning of a fight for justice, and she intended to see it through to the end. Arriving at the police station, Clarissa was escorted to the lobby, under the curious gaze of several officers. Officer Collins, visibly pleased with his authority, sat her down on a cold metal chair, while the sound of handcuffs snapping echoed through the room. "So you're finally going to cooperate?" Collins said, grinning arrogantly. Clarissa crossed her arms, her back straight. "Cooperate? For what? To be falsely accused of theft? I remind you that I am Chief Justice of the Court of Appeal. You are committing a blatant abuse of power." A young officer nearby gave Collins an uncomfortable look. Officer, maybe we should check his papers? Collins shook his head. No. She's trying to manipulate me. At that moment, a phone vibrated in a pocket, then another. Outraged neighbors began filming the scene from outside, and soon the videos were circulating on social media. The hashtags #JusticeForClarissa and #PoliceRacism began appearing. Clarissa, aware that this attention could work in her favor, remained calm. She knew that giving in to anger would only give Collins an excuse to discredit her. So she spoke in a firm but calm voice. Every unjust act is documented, and today the whole city is watching you. You can continue to ignore the truth, but history will remember what you do. Collins, red with frustration, banged on the counter. Quiet. But his orders rang hollow. Murmurs and the sounds of phones continued to fill the hall, each witness helping to capture the agent's humiliation and Clarissa's dignity. An officer finally approached with a file. Ma'am, here's your proof of ownership. Clarissa took it calmly, scanned the papers, and nodded slightly. There. It would have avoided all this humiliation if you had done your homework properly from the start. Collins looked away, unable to reply. The judge knew this day would be a turning point. Her dignity, patience, and strategy would soon involve more powerful forces, notably Attorney General Antoine Delacroix, who would never accept that justice be trampled underfoot like this. As Clarissa finished signing the documents proving her ownership, her phone buzzed. It was an urgent call from her longtime ally, Antoine Delacroix, the state's Attorney General. Clarissa, he asked in a serious but calm tone. I heard what's going on. Stay where you are. I'll take care of Collins. Clarissa felt a mixture of relief and determination. Thank you, Antoine. I knew I could count on you. A few minutes later, a black car roared to a halt in front of the police station. Delacroix got out, accompanied by 2 assistants and a civil rights lawyer. He entered the lobby with natural authority, immediately commanding the respect of all the officers present. Officer Collins, he began, his voice echoing through the hall, I order you to release Ms. Beaufort immediately. You had no evidence of theft, and your actions constitute a clear abuse of power. Collins, surprised and blushing, stammered, Mr. Attorney. I was just doing my job. Delacroix raised a finger, cutting off any attempt at an apology. Doing your job does not give you the right to humiliate a public official and ignore legal procedures. You are suspended immediately pending a full investigation. Clarissa sat down and took a deep breath. The stress of the morning was beginning to give way to Delacroix's authority and integrity. She stood up and, in a calm but firm voice, said, Thank you, Antoine. You have just done more than defend me, you have shown that justice must be respected, regardless of skin color. Delacroix smiled at her briefly, serious but compassionate. We will make sure this kind of injustice doesn't happen again. You are not alone in this fight. The officers present, witnessing this confrontation, remained silent. The tension was palpable, but Clarissa knew that the moment was crucial. Justice had just taken over. Collins, humiliated but still proud, was escorted from the hall. As Clarissa left the police station, Delacroix whispered to her. This is just the beginning. We're going to document this, and you're going to show everyone that no one is above the law, not even a prejudiced police officer. Clarissa nodded. She knew that her intact dignity and the prosecutor's intervention were the first steps in a larger fight against systemic racism. After Clarissa's release, she and Delacroix found themselves in the prosecutor's office, a plain but imposing space where every decision had an impact on the entire state. Delacroix placed a thick file on the table. Clarissa, he began seriously, I've been investigating Derek Collins. This isn't the first time he's been implicated in incidents of discrimination and abuse of power. Clarissa frowned. How is he still in service? Delacroix sighed. The system is flawed. But this time, we have irrefutable proof. The video of your arrest is circulating on social media. We can use it to expose his intentional and discriminatory behavior. Clarissa took a deep breath. I want justice, Antoine. Not just for me, but for everyone who suffers this kind of silent injustice every day. The prosecutor nodded. Exactly. We're going to build a strong case. Collins will not only be suspended, but he'll also face charges of abuse of power and racial discrimination. I want everything documented, witness statements, videos, anything that can prove his behavior. Clarissa, calm but determined, replied. And we also have to show that I have never been a criminal. That my position, my role, and my skin color are not pretexts to discredit me. Delacroix gave a small smile. You have nothing to prove about your integrity, Clarissa. But together, we will show the public and the system that systemic racism will not go unpunished. They spent the next few hours gathering every piece of evidence, every witness statement, and every document that could strengthen their case. Delacroix's team also contacted reliable journalists to ensure the story was reported correctly and the truth came out before Collins had a chance to manipulate the facts. Clarissa felt a mixture of relief and determination. This day had begun as utter humiliation, but now it was transforming into a strategic fight for justice. And she knew the real challenge was only just beginning, exposing Collins and the systemic racism he represented to an entire state. In the days that followed, Clarissa Beaufort devoted herself entirely to preparing her case. She and Antoine Delacroix formed a formidable duo, combining legal strategy, tangible evidence, and media influence to create an irreversible impact. A conference room in the courthouse now served as headquarters. Several civil rights lawyers were present, their faces focused and determined. We must demonstrate that this arrest was not just a mistake, but an act of blatant racial discrimination, one of the lawyers said. Every detail matters, the video, the neighbor's testimony, Collins's arrogant behavior, everything must be documented. Clarissa, calm and composed, added. This isn't just about me. It's about every person who has been wrongfully targeted because they are black. We must show that justice can and must protect all citizens. Delacroix spoke. We will also take action against the police for breaching their professional duties. Collins' suspension is just the beginning. We want reforms to be implemented so this kind of abuse never happens again. Every day, Clarissa reviewed the footage, reread the reports, and questioned witnesses. Collins's every word and every gesture was analyzed to reveal his discriminatory intent. The lawyers prepared precise questions for the trial, anticipating Collins's every attempt at defense or excuse. At the same time, Delacroix contacted trusted journalists to ensure the story was accurately reported. Articles began circulating on social media and in national media outlets, denouncing the injustice and Collins's behavior. Public pressure on the police and Collins mounted daily. Clarissa felt the tension, but she remained steadfast. Her intact dignity, her patience, and her strategy became more powerful weapons than Collins's hatred or arrogance. She knew that the fight for justice had only just begun, and that every step had to be precisely planned if the truth was to triumph. A few days after the incident, Antoine Delacroix held an emergency press conference outside the city courthouse. Cameras, microphones, and journalists were crowded around him. The air was thick with anticipation and emotion. Delacroix took his place behind the lectern, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. He began in a firm, clear voice. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to affirm a fundamental truth: justice must be equal for all, regardless of skin color. He continued, citing the Clarissa Beaufort case. A Chief Justice of our Court of Appeal was wrongly arrested, humiliated, and accused of theft by a police officer. No citizen, whether judge or ordinary citizen, should be subjected to such abuse of power. Reporters were frantically taking notes, cameras filming every word. Delacroix raised a finger for emphasis. We investigated Officer Derek Collins. His actions are not isolated, they reflect bias and discriminatory behavior that has no place in our justice system. Clarissa, present in the room, listened without a word, her calm and dignity striking the observers. Delacroix concluded. I want to reassure the public, Collins is suspended, and a full investigation is underway. But beyond this case, we must work together to ensure that justice is truly impartial and respectful. No one should be judged because of the color of their skin. Applause erupted, some journalists nodding their heads in admiration. Social media instantly ignited. Citizens began sharing the conference, supporting Clarissa and saluting Delacroix's courage. Clarissa, then stepping forward to thank the prosecutor, said simply, "Thank you, Antoine. Today, you didn't just defend a judge. You defended justice itself." Delacroix smiled slightly, satisfied. "And we will continue, Clarissa. This is only the beginning." At that moment, the entire city seemed to hold its breath. The groundwork was laid, public opinion was mobilized, the prosecutor had taken a stand, and Clarissa was ready to fight her legal battle with strength and determination. A few weeks later, the Derek Collins case came to trial. The courtroom was packed, journalists, citizens, and Clarissa's colleagues had come to witness the high-profile trial. The atmosphere was thick with tension and anticipation. Clarissa sat beside her lawyers, calmly observing the room. Collins entered, visibly uncomfortable under the scrutiny. His morning arrogance had given way to a palpable nervousness. The judge in charge, an experienced and impartial man, opened the session. "We are gathered to consider the allegations of abuse of power and racial discrimination against Officer Derek Collins." Clarissa's lawyers began by presenting the evidence, videos of the arrest, testimony from neighbors, and reports detailing Collins's discriminatory behavior. Each piece of evidence highlighted the arbitrariness of the arrest and the complete lack of legal justification. When Clarissa was called to testify, she stood calmly, each step echoing with dignity. Silence fell over the room. "Ms. Beaufort," Collins's lawyer began, trying to unsettle her, "can you explain why you did not cooperate immediately?" Clarissa looked him straight in the eye and replied in a calm but firm voice, "Because I hadn't committed any crime. I'm the chief judge of the state appeals court, and I had the right to ask for evidence before I suffered public humiliation." The murmurs in the room intensified. The judge was demonstrating not only her dignity but also her command of the situation. The lawyer continued, "Couldn't you have provoked Officer Collins?" Clarissa shook her head. "No. I followed the law. Collins chose to ignore it and let his prejudices guide his actions." Prosecutor Delacroix, present in the room, watched every gesture and every word. He knew that Clarissa's calm and controlled performance would influence the jury and the audience. As the hours passed, more witnesses were called, each account reinforcing Clarissa's story, an act of discrimination, a blatant injustice, and an abuse of power. Collins, unable to justify his actions, gradually lost his composure. When the session ended, the tension was palpable. Clarissa left the room, head held high, determined to see justice triumph. This day had shown that dignity and truth could shake an abuse of power more than anger or hatred. In the days following the trial, the entire city seemed to have awakened to the injustice suffered by Clarissa Beaufort. Groups of citizens spontaneously gathered in the streets, holding signs with messages such as, "Justice for Clarissa," "Police racism, enough," "Respect for all, regardless of skin color." Social media amplified these movements. Each video, each testimony was shared, commented on, and supported by thousands of outraged citizens. Local, and then national, media outlets picked up the story, highlighting not only the injustice of the arrest, but also Clarissa's courage and dignity. In the courtroom, Collins and her lawyer were under pressure. The public perception was unanimous. Clarissa was not just the victim of an arbitrary act, she had become the symbol of a fight against systemic racism and the abuse of power. Clarissa, aware of the impact of her situation, continued to work with her lawyers and Delacroix to ensure that each piece of evidence was presented strategically. But outside of court, she saw something even more powerful, the mobilization of her community. Peaceful marches were organized, letters were sent to the mayor and governor, community meetings were held to discuss police reforms. Even national civil rights organizations took a stand, pledging their support and expertise. One evening, as she walked home, Clarissa looked out at the streets lit by streetlights and the protesters' placards. She felt a surge of emotion, the city that had seen her humiliated had risen up alongside her. Delacroix, at his side, murmured, "Look at this. This isn't just for you, Clarissa. This is for everyone who has never had a voice. And we're going to keep going until justice is complete. Clarissa nodded, her eyes shining. The struggle was only just beginning, but for the first time, she felt that injustice could truly be corrected, not just by law, but by the collective strength of the community. The day of the verdict finally arrived. The courtroom was packed with journalists and citizens who had come to witness this historic decision. The atmosphere was electrifying, everyone aware that the outcome would go far beyond the case of a single police officer. Officer Derek Collins entered, visibly tense, avoiding the accusing stares of the crowd and the media. Clarissa, calm and dignified, took her place beside her lawyers, every movement expressing confidence and patience. The judge stood up and opened the session. After reviewing the evidence, testimony and circumstances surrounding Ms. Beaufort's arrest, the court finds Officer Derek Collins guilty of abuse of power and racial discrimination. A murmur rippled through the room, quickly followed by subdued but meaningful applause. Collins paled, unable to hide his surprise and frustration. The sentence was pronounced: permanent suspension from his duties, substantial fines, and mandatory training on non-discrimination and professional ethics. Clarissa took a deep breath. This victory was not just personal, it represented a clear signal that justice could triumph over racism and the abuse of power. She turned to Delacroix and said, "Thank you, Antoine. Today we showed that no one is above the law, not even an arrogant police officer." Delacroix smiled at him, satisfied. "And this is only the beginning. We will continue to ensure that structural changes are implemented. But today, victory belongs to you and to justice." The news spread like wildfire throughout the city. Citizens applauded the decision, recognizing Clarissa's courage and Delacroix's steadfastness. Demonstrations and mobilizations for police reform grew in strength, with the tangible hope that this type of injustice would now be harder to repeat. Clarissa, walking out of the courtroom into the bright sunshine, felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Justice had spoken, her dignity was intact, and a powerful message had been sent to all: integrity and perseverance always triumph in the end. A few weeks after the trial, Clarissa Beaufort returned to her role as Chief Justice of the Court of Appeal with new authority and a strengthened reputation. The city, marked by her courage and dignity, now saw in her a symbol of justice and resilience. In court, Clarissa's colleagues greeted her with respect and admiration. Proceedings resumed their normal course, but this time, the weight of past injustice had given way to a renewed faith in the system. Every decision Clarissa made reflected not only her legal expertise, but also her determination to uphold fairness and human dignity. Antoine Delacroix, always at his side, had implemented reforms to strengthen police accountability and prevent future abuses. Together, they worked on training, awareness-raising, and internal monitoring programs, demonstrating that justice could be proactive, not just reactive. In the city, the community continued to celebrate this victory. Peaceful protests and citizen initiatives for police reform took root, inspired by Clarissa's example. She had become a respected public figure, not only for her role as a judge, but for her ability to transform injustice into concrete change. One morning, looking at her SUV legally parked in front of her house, Clarissa smiled. The scars of humiliation were still there, but they had transformed into strength and determination. She knew that every battle fought with dignity and patience brought her closer to a more just society. Delacroix, at his side, murmured with a smile, "You have shown everyone that justice is not just a matter of law, but a matter of courage and truth." Clarissa nodded confidently. "And we will continue, Antoine. Because justice is never complete while injustice still exists." As the sun rose over the city, a new era seemed to be dawning, an era where integrity, dignity, and courage could transform lives, inspire the community, and remind everyone that true power lies in justice and perseverance.